what I didn't realize about Daniel was that it sends you on a treasure hunt through the entire Bible, through Old Testament, New Testament. It's like a hinge, this beautiful hinge in the scripture where everything just kind of comes together. Somebody said the book of Daniel is a shadow in the corner of every page of the book of Matthew.
Hello, and this is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. We're really excited because it's not just Carder and myself. We have Kristen here with Sight and Sound, and she is one of the writers. She is one of the producers of Daniel, which is now hitting Sight and Sound stage. And I'm curious, just right off the bat, what is the process? Because I've actually witnessed one of those plays in person. I've known about it for quite some time, but we saw Moses a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it was wonderful. It was a delight. It was in Branson when we took it in. I know that you're currently at Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
What is the process in determining which play are we going to do next? Is that predetermined, or is that you as a writer? I think it should be Daniel.
Yeah, and great question. I think it happens a little bit differently every single time. In this case, Daniel, Sight and Sound actually did a production of Daniel years and years ago. I can't remember the exact amount, and it was just sort of like the team, the executive team at the theater, through prayer and research, just decided, hey, it's time to bring that story back, and with just an entirely new take from the ground up. Obviously, the story is the story, so it's not going to be wildly different. But
right.
It's all new songs, new script, new sets, new costumes, the whole thing.
You gave it a facelift, yeah. Okay,
Like maybe more so even. But yeah.
Well, I take it feels like there for a little bit you would be like a Bible scholar of trying to understand all of the story, of what pieces of the story are needed to come into the production. So just take us through your research project of Daniel as a writer.
Yeah. Wow. Great question. So these shows, they take about 3.5 years to get to the stage from top to bottom. And that first year is such a sweet time as a producer and as a writer, because you're really incubated with the story. And I will say this, I am not the same believer that I was before diving into Daniel that I am after.
How so?
It was transformative. So what I didn't realize about Daniel was that it sends you on a treasure hunt through the entire Bible, through Old Testament, New Testament. It's like a hinge, this beautiful hinge in the scripture where everything just kind of comes together. Like the old is leading up to it and the new kind of comes from it. And I'm trying to think, listen, I really should have got my notes more together because I am not great about remembering who said what and where things are, but I'm like, I can remember what they were. And so I'll do my best for you guys. But somebody said the book of Daniel is a shadow in the corner of every page of the book of Matthew. And I was like, whoa, because it was kind of considered, for lack of a better term, like a hot bestseller at the time. I mean, you've got the Roman occupation, you've got the oppression happening, and so they're going to love Daniel, where it talks about, the kingdoms of this world collapsing and the one like the Son of Man taking the throne, God's kingdom coming to earth. So they are all about it. They just the people at that time didn't necessarily have the correct idea about how Jesus was actually going to do that, right? Yeah. So all that to say that during that sweet year of research and study and interviews, that was the big revelation at the end of all of it, was how Daniel is just this big melting pot of Old Testament and even New Testament. And so I through just a lot of documentaries too on Babylon, by the way, lots of Nebuchadnezzar study through different books, and then interviewed several pastors as well and some other theologians. Just, the book of Daniel, it's sort of divided. You've got the plot, the big things that kind of happen, the first half of the book, and then the second half of the book is like the visions and the prophecy and the more mysterious, abstract, grand, terrifying, aspects of the book. So anyway, it was interesting to find people who were sort of scholars and very studied on both sides of it, because we really wanted to tell the whole story of Daniel. We didn't want to ignore the dreams and the visions, and we didn't want to just like blow past the miracles. And what you realize, sorry, you asked me one question and I can go. So if you guys
That's okay.
Go
We
for
can
it.
too.
Yeah.
It's all right.
hit pause, like let me know. But what was so cool is once you get to the second half of Daniel, it gives you time markers. And so then you can go, when you plug those visions and those dreams back into the first half of the book of Daniel, you start to see the significance of those dreams and those visions unfold. And you start to understand why at the core of this book, there are so many themes, right? Kingdom, worship, faithfulness, endurance, perseverance. There's, so many things. Wisdom, huge themes. But at the core, what I really found was hope. This is an unapologetic, gritty, beautiful, hopeful story. And that is in every single page of that book. Down to the scary stuff, down to the weird stuff, down to like the epic stuff, the mild stuff. And that was what got me. I think at the end is I'm like, man, I serve a God of hope, of unapologetic hope.
What was the most surprising thing? You said that you talked a lot with, you watched a lot of documentaries.
Yes.
Carter and I really like documentaries about Babylon.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're trying to set yourself, I would imagine, as a writer. Here I am, an Israelite. Whether or not they were actually heeding the words of the prophets before them when Daniel and his friends were taken off.
Right.
They were expecting it or they weren't expecting what took place next. And who could even, imagine that they would be in the courts of Nebuchadnezzar and saved. But I guess what would be the most surprising thing you've learned about Babylonian culture that would help us kind of get into the shoes of a Hebrew slave?
Wow. That's such a good question. I think, yes. I mean, what people, I love what you said. What people don't always put together is that the Hebrew people, especially in Judah, they did not think that this was going to happen because the temple was there. So they thought the temple was like spirit, like insurance. They were like, nope, God's not going to let anything happen to this place because we've got the temple. And God's like, nope. And at that time too, there was so much idolatry in Israel, and not just like, like bowing before statues. Like we're talking children, we're talking violence, we're talking, perverse things, like really horrible things happening pervasively in Israel, in Judah. And so they would have been, Daniel and his friends, and I'm pretty passionate about using their Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Just because, their Babylonian names are a mockery and all that. So I'm like, let's restore, let's make those guys familiar. Let's give them their true names. Anyway, so those four would have been privy to a lot because they were in the royal family. They were being trained up to serve this king. And Jehoiakim, I think Kim was first, he was awful, allowing these things. And so Jeremiah is crying out against the city for years. And, before that you have Amos, you have Isaiah, you have all of, everybody telling them it's going to happen. So like you said, whether they believed that or not, who knows? But once they got into Babylon, I think even as bad or as corrupt as things were at home, you can't even walk down the sidewalk in Babylon without stepping on but without being almost a participant of idol worship, because they would bury idols all along the roads under every single building. And Nebuchadnezzar's famous for saying, I want no enemy on earth or in the sky. So he actually had an inclusive mindset, not an exclusive mindset. So they take all of the vessels of worship out of the Lord's temple, and they're bringing them into Marduk's temple, their temple, which he's actually famous for erecting. And so it's not about it's about desecrating eventually because they're stubborn and they're rebellious. But at first it's about, nope, we're all one. This is all one thing, which is very Tower of Babel. So that Tower of Babel mindset really raises its head again in the Babylon that Daniel would have been familiar with. So it was
Kristen?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, but you told me I could press that pause. You have stirred the pot of my brain.
Sorry.
So I would love to ask, you were talking about how Nebuchadnezzar didn't want any enemies above or below, and so he hid all these idols everywhere, right? Very Tower of Babel. It sounds like, because I know that Roman culture, in order to keep the peace, would adopt all of the idols of other nations that they had conquered. But it was more like keeping the peace. That wasn't Nebuchadnezzar's thing, right? It was more of a selfish thing, or
Yeah, more of a Babylon is the pinnacle thing. So it's like these gods are here or whatever, and now they are all subject to our God, or our gods, our pantheon. But like they're all here. You know what I mean? So there was definitely, there were lines drawn in the sand as far as worship goes. But it was still, there was more of an inclusivity mindset than I think we initially think. When we think Nebuchadnezzar, we think VeggieTales. You know, we think
a bumblebee,
bunny, you know. And so he wasn't just this bombastic, like, you know, kind of full king, or like even just he was tyrannical, but he was brilliant. And for the culture that he was bred by and a part of in leading, all of these things, every single action that he makes is actually something that is praiseworthy by the standards of the world at the time. So he's admirable through the lens of the culture and of the world. He was brilliant.
It kind of makes me think about our culture, even maybe more than Roman culture, of just everything's great. Everything, we all, the same kind of thing. So I love Rachelle's question because I think it's so important to view things.
Which one? I've been spouting off.
You've asked a lot of.
I don't know.
They've been good.
Know.
Yeah. The viewing the Bible through the lens of the reader and of the culture at the time. And I would think that even though it's Jeremiah, that 29:11 would be the crux maybe of what you try to do as the way we interpret as a culture that compared to what it actually was.
Yeah.
And that's probably hard for you as what you're doing in writing a production like Daniel, because you have what it meant to them and the promise to that specific group of people.
Yeah.
But then you have obviously that verse, for the plans I have for you, you know, to prosper you. And that's on coffee mugs everywhere, and people say that's about their nephew's karate tournament, you know, and it's so out of context, right? Yeah. So I guess the question is twofold here.
Yeah.
What about maybe the bigger stories in Daniel? You know, maybe like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or excuse me, the Hebrew names I don't have off the top of my head.
But she's now made me passionate. I want to learn.
Yeah. Or the Lion's Den. You know, those are kind of the two big ones there.
Yeah.
What about maybe one of those? Are you able to see through that lens after your research of stuff that we didn't pick up in Sunday school, and it's not taught that way in Sunday school?
Yeah.
And then, so that's one question, but then how do you bring that to an audience and display that in the proper context, even though they won't necessarily know that off the you know, the top of their head?
Wow. So really good question. Yeah, that verse is definitely put into context, at least in the show. We went to effort to do that. And it really, again, going back to the hope thing, it's hope that defies circumstances. It's hope that defies what you're being labeled as, or what you're being, the one thing that Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, Darius even couldn't get from Daniel and couldn't get from his friends was their worship. That was the only thing they had left in the end, is where can I put my worship? And when that line would get drawn, they would never cross it every time. Even though they may have, I don't want to say compromised in a negative way, but they definitely had to use the craftsmanship of wisdom to navigate the culture that they were in. But they were always, they loved mercy, walked humbly. What is it? Love mercy.
Do justly, love mercy.
Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God.
I don't want to come off like a Bible nerd. We literally just went over that, though, in church.
You?
So,
it's good. Okay, all right.
So there you go.
All right.
Micah 6:8.
Then you're good. We won't judge you for being too much of a Christian.
No,
Too Christian.
Do justice. And I feel like if they had a mantra, I don't know, I'm making that up, but that would have been it. Like, how do we stay rooted? How do we stay grounded? We do justice, we love mercy, and we walk humbly with God. We don't run ahead of him. We don't lag behind him. We don't say, no, I'm not going to go. We walk with him. Yes. And that is the staple of every biblical faith hero, right? Is they walked with God. And I just feel like that's what these guys exemplified. So all that to say, actually in the show, you get to the tower, not the tower, well, kind of the tower. You get to the idol that Nebuchadnezzar erects, and it's like everybody, okay, bow to this thing, bow to king, bow to country, bow to our pantheon, like just everything that represents Babylon, bow to it, worship it,
Submit.
yes, submit, ultimate allegiance, right? And that's why they were like, we can't do that, and they just so graciously and respectfully defy this order. And it's like, for them, again, it wasn't about being physically saved. They said, even if he doesn't, this is not an outcome-based transaction. Like, my worship is not outcome-based. My worship it's rooted, it's deep, it's steadfast. Like, I'm not going to compromise it no matter what. So they are physically delivered from the fire, right? And one, like the Son of the Gods, shows up in that fire. What's significant about that, and I really hope I'm right about this, I'm digging back here. If this happened in the plains of Dura, which is supposedly where the Tower of Babel would have been erected. And the point of the Tower of Babel was it says to reach the heavens, but what they were going for was they were building a temple and they wanted to trap God in that temple. Like, they wanted to trap him and create a transactional thing. So again, Nebuchadnezzar's mindset is Babylon is where heaven and earth collide. Like, this is where he wants Babylon to get back to its ancient glory. So when he erects this statue, and when one like the Son of the Gods shows up in that, like in a furnace, right? But in that area, in that place of worship, but it's to protect and deliver the ones who didn't compromise their worship. You know, he knows who it is, and all that. So it's just such a flip on the head of the Tower of Babel story, and one that would have rang so loud in Nebuchadnezzar's mind and soul. And these things were for Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, they were to deliver those guys, but he's the one who saw, and God gave him opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to see his power, to feel his call, to submit to his kingdom, and that's really what that moment is. So those guys are delivered out of the fire. And then I'm not exactly sure of the timeline, but you have Jerusalem that's being burned within this time frame, whether it's after, before, I can't remember exactly, but you have Jerusalem is not delivered from the fire. And so, like, that message of it's about the heart. It's not about the nation. It's not, the nations are important to the Lord. I'm not saying they're not, but it's about the heart. Like, my people, if you are my people, then it's here. It's not about anything here. It's about what's here.
When you were talking about the temple earlier, and that, they won't touch it. It was more like a superstition, I think, at that point for so many of the people. Yeah. And Ezekiel had already had that vision of God's presence leaving. And so that kind of tells you relationally where people were for the most part, but then you have these faithful few. And you think about the parents that faithfully continue to share that word over and over again.
Absolutely.
So that they would raise someone like a Daniel who would be able to stand firm and not submit like that.
I say, going back to further, know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Can you imagine hearing that? Like, you're being thrown in the furnace, and that spirit, that scripture is ringing in your spirit. The temple is burning behind you, and what Jeremiah's words are ringing in your spirit and going, I know the plans I have for you while everything is on fire. That's what it's about, or I can,
Wow. Yeah.
No, it's really powerful for us today, even. Jesus he wasn't like, he wasn't hiding these truths from us in his messages. I think we always kind of go back to that. Is linear thinking the right way to say it? It has to look a certain way. And so whether that's like, my rules are my idol, my superstitions have become the rules, or whatever that looks like, even with the Pharisees and Sadducees, there were definitely men in there who fully, authentically were seeking God. Yeah. But then they would get stuck on these traditions or what have you. And Jesus would always come back to what we hear over and over again is, I don't want your sacrifice, I want your obedience, through the story of Daniel and anyway.
The Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is the rebuttal to that whole system. And the Sermon on the Mount is a description of Daniel's life.
Daniel,
Yeah,
which
that's
he loved
interesting.
Daniel. Jesus, first of all, he called himself Son of Man,
Right.
which is taken from the scriptures from Daniel.
Right.
I thought
Exactly.
that was interesting.
That's, yep.
And the whole prophecy, look, I don't know if you've heard this one. This one is very interesting, though, to me. When referencing when Jesus is there before Caiaphas, and do you know what I'm about to say?
Speak my language.
Okay.
There's a dance going on.
So,
All right,
okay,
yeah.
and I can't see your face right now, so I'm so excited. So Carter, this is, she may have something different, but Caiaphas is standing there, and Jesus chooses that moment to quote a scripture from Daniel. You will see the Son of Man, and he will be elevated and right there at the right hand of the Son of God. Anyway, I said it completely wrong, but I think you know that moment in the trial of Jesus. And he's quoting Daniel, and this is a passage where we are seeing these different nations and they're being represented by Daniel, these kingdoms, through these creatures that are coming up from the water, and they have different horns, and they're supposed to symbolize different kingdoms and things like this. I've heard it speculated that in the moment where the final beast is revealed, it is basically the beast. Jesus is using that reference point to look at Caiaphas and call out what the church has become. And we are truly the beast. We are the ones that every single time we get in the way of ourselves and what is true.
Listen.
That is, am I hitting the nail?
Listen as in like, you don't have to stop talking. I'm just, it's my amen.
Yeah.
No, I
sure.
mean, there's that. I think I've heard that as well. And I think, it's Rome as well, possibly that last beast. And then, but Caiaphas and the church being like, no, you're turning, it's about empire and not kingdom. And like, Jesus is about kingdom, and that's about empire. And he's like, the minute that
That's so good.
all that to say, amen, I hear you, and I'm with you. And I think when Jesus is saying, I'm the Son of Man, when he drops that term about himself, and when he drops it to Caiaphas, like you're saying, that's the equivalent of somebody saying, and I think I heard this on Bible Project maybe, but Luke, I am your father. We all know, all know that quote. We know that character. We know that movie. That's how famous, the story of Daniel, it was, again, like so hot. It was so hot then. Hot
The bestseller,
topic. So when
I like that.
Yes, and so he's bringing Daniel up as much as he can, like you said. You know, just another neat tidbit here. This was kind of just so random, sort of related to what we're talking about. But Gabriel, when he appears to Daniel, he says, "You who are highly favored." Who else does he say that to in the Bible?
Mary.
Mary. And so there was such like, oh wow, like. What I don't know. Just, I don't really know what I fully think about it, but what a sweet
just cool.
connection.
It's
Isn't that
interesting.
beautiful? Like, man, if Gabriel shows up
Yes.
to you, it means you are so loved and you're trusted.
I love this. We could talk to you for hours.
We
I think we'll
really
just have you
could.
back. You should just be our third co-host.
Kristen!
I
yeah.
love you guys. This is awesome. I love how you dove right in. I was like, it's going to be hard for me to small talk about Daniel because y'all can see I'm a big nerd. It's tough.
So let me ask you this, because this would be a whole episode of itself, but I'll just ask it this way. In terms of eschatology and the end of the world, when you
Don't you do this.
deep dived in Daniel, do you feel more not that you need to even give away how you feel and believe what you personally believe, but just do you feel more concrete or do you feel more confused on with all the represented the imagery there at the end of the book?
You guys ask such good questions. I feel, you know what? I feel peaceful.
Oh, I love that answer. You give such good answers.
I feel
love that.
peaceful. And again,
feel
it's like kind of what I was saying at the beginning is I'm realizing, first of all, like you were saying, Jeremiah 29:11, like, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And like, yes, you're going to see dragons rise up from the sea and you're going to hide in the caves and horrible things are going to happen and have happened and will happen, you know, whatever. It's all, you know, but he's the God who calms the storm. He is our refuge. He's our strong tower. He's our king. And can you imagine that? I mean, even though it says, I love Daniel's response to these visions so much, it actually makes me laugh out loud, like actually LOL, when it's like, and he got up and he went about the king's business after being homesick for a day because he was like, what the heck?
Yeah, he was really nuts.
And then he was like,
I wouldn't be in a good way after a dream like that.
Yeah. And then you're like, I guess I'll go back to work or whatever. Like, how do you live in the...
You can't even blame it on the food you're eating because he's eating vegetables.
That's right.
Too many vegetables last night.
Yeah. And like, how do you live in the here and now when you know what's coming? But for Daniel, you know, he's stewarding God's vision for the world, and God has placed him next to the kings of the world. Daniel is living out the mission that God had for his people from the beginning, which was go tame that wilderness, tame the beasts out there. Like, go tame them, teach them my ways, cultivate, nurture this world. And Daniel's just walking that out. And I'm like, you know what? That is my business. That's my business.
And we have that beautiful representation with Nebuchadnezzar as well. As this is what we become when we eliminate God from our lives.
That is it. That is it. And it is all over the Bible in so many different books. Yes. Yeah. And it's, something that you learn about Daniel quickly when you start to study it is it's a book of men and beasts. And then you realize, wait, the Bible is a book of men and beasts.
Yes.
And apart from our obedience and submission to him, we're animals.
Yeah.
It's Cain.
We become,
Yeah.
We become like beasts.
Okay, we'll just do...
is this part one?
We'll have you back for a 6-hour episode next time.
Well, it is kind of difficult. It's like unpack. It's if you sat down with people who have truly even studied just John 3:16, you could talk for hours about just that one verse alone. Now we give you a whole book.
And then it's like
you've devoted 3.5 years studying.
Yes, 3.5 years study. And here's the book of Daniel, and now write a 2-hour musical about it. What?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's insane. I'm like, how many musicals could you write about Daniel? A lot. But, we did our best. I think what you guys will appreciate specifically is we have Ezekiel in there. We've got Jeremiah in there. We have some of the dreams and visions, and we have them woven into the timeline as best we can with the story of Daniel. We tried our best to tell it and to demystify it. And for people to know at the end, we just want you to walk away knowing that the king is coming and he's good and he's worth serving now and he's with you. And
you were the right person to write it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You were the right person.
Yeah, that's the thing is you never know where, any of these movies we see or, and who's writing and all this stuff. And the fact that we get to sit down, we just met you just a few minutes before we started, and just hearing your heart and knowing the expertise that goes in behind it. We love it.
Authenticity.
Thanks, guys.
Exactly. So Kristen Brewer that wrote and produced Daniel, Sight and Sound. If you're in Branson, if you're in Lancaster, and certainly if you want to see it in theaters, text the word sound to 893-893.
Yep. Special live broadcast event, Labor Day weekend.